Today I wanted to talk about something that is a little bit off topic from what I usually talk about, but it's something that I went through recently and it's something that a lot of women go through, which is why I wanted to talk about it. This video is going to be sharing about my miscarriage story. This happened to me about a month ago and I wanted to share my whole experience. I've never been through something like this before, and I know a lot of women go through it, like what I said, but a lot of people don't really talk about it, don't really share about it, and I understand why, because I know it can be a very traumatic experience. God has given me the grace to have overcome this and feel like I'm at a place where I'm ready to share my story, and hopefully it can help someone out there going through something similar, give you strength, encouragement, hope, and let you know that you're not alone and that it's something that happens to a lot of people out there. So I just wanted to kind of share with you guys from the beginning to when it was actually happening and how it was afterward. It's just so you can get an idea kind of what to expect. It's not something that has to be taboo or something that you have to be afraid of. And so I wanted to share my story. I had thought to prepare some notes, but my tablet ran out of batteries, and so I'm just kind of gonna wing it and trust that whatever needs to be said is gonna be said, and whoever's watching, just know that this video is for you. Before I get started with my miscarriage story, I kind of want to lead into it by saying that my husband and I had decided that we were excited and ready to start a family. We had never actually tried to get pregnant before. Thankfully, I was able to get pregnant, but I was just learning so much in this whole process. I just realized that growing up, we're never really taught how to monitor our cycle, what different stages of our cycle mean in our body, and what to look out for. So I actually learned a lot through this process of getting pregnant. I also learned that we are often pushed to be on contraceptives a lot when, this is my opinion, they aren't really necessary all the time. Everyone's situation is going to be different, but once I started looking into natural methods of birth control and getting pregnant, I just realized that we are pushed to be on birth control when really, if you know your cycle and you can monitor your cycle, a lot of the times you don't really need to use birth control. As long as you know which days you're ovulating, you can actually be sure to not get pregnant, or if you're trying to get pregnant, you're gonna wanna have sex during those days. And these are just things that people didn't really talk about growing up. It's kind of a sensitive subject, but a book, if you want to learn more about this, is this one that my mom gave me. It's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler. And this book has just given me so much information, and I highly recommend it to any women out there, whatever stage of life you're in, whether you're trying to get pregnant, whether you're not trying to get pregnant. I know for me, my body just really didn't agree with birth control. I would feel so sick. I kept trying a bunch of different kinds and my body just kept rejecting them. Even the IUD I tried and my body rejected it. If you have just been struggling with birth control, I highly recommend checking out this book. It really helps you to figure out how to monitor your cycle. And so yeah, that's that. And these are just kind of the things that no one really tells you. You kind of have to find them out. I mean, my mom did share this book with me, and I think that if she knew about this earlier for herself, she would have shared with me too. But honestly, I just found this out, so I hope that this could help someone else too. Let's get into the story. So I was so excited. I could tell immediately. Within 2 weeks of getting pregnant, I already knew I was pregnant. So my period hadn't even come yet, but I could just tell that I was pregnant, which is why I took a test. I could tell so early because I know now, like, when my body's ovulating, and I could just tell that there was something different. And so I took a test, and sure enough, I was pregnant. I was so excited, and also kind of like shocked and excited for the future. I was super nauseous the first trimester. Like, I could barely get off the couch because I was very nauseous. Nothing sounded appealing to me to eat, which is funny because everyone always says you're gonna be super hungry, but maybe it's just because that's the first trimester. but that's my experience. And everything was going good, but then one day I hadn't thrown up, I was just very nauseous. And one day I just went to the bathroom, and when I wiped, a little spot, like a brown spot, not like dark, but it was just like kind of when you're about to get your period, it looked kind of like that. And I freaked out immediately. My mind went to the worst place, of course. And I remember I was taking a shower, and like this fear just was like in my mind so strong that I couldn't control my body. I felt like I was about to pass out or puke or something. And maybe it was just the combination of like being afraid of what that meant and also being nauseous, but I threw up a couple times after that. I had to get out of the shower. After that day, everything changed, and after that I just kind of started getting more crampy and more spotting, and but it seemed to like get a little bit worse and slowly. And so finally I thought, okay, I need to go see someone. And this is also something I would recommend, is like, for me, I had never had health issues, and so I barely go to the doctor, honestly. And we also work for ourselves, so going to see a doctor out of pocket is very expensive, but we are also very healthy. I had just taken a health test, a blood test, everything was perfect. I'm not sick, nothing. And so I was like, yeah, I'll get a gynecologist once I get further along. But that was a big mistake now looking back, because gynecologists are very hard to get in, especially in the US. Like, you should have your gynecologist already lined up before you get pregnant, which is something that now I have, thankfully. But at that time we had just moved, so I didn't have anyone. And so then when I started spotting, I was like, okay, what do I do? So all we could think to do was go to the ER. And I happened to be sitting by this girl in the ER, and she was telling me like, hey, don't worry, like, I have been through this before. I was bleeding a lot in the toilet, like the water was red, and my baby was still fine. So she like kind of assured me, because I started crying in the ER. I was like really scared. I ended up actually leaving because we were waiting for so long, and I was like, nothing's like an emergency, like I'm not in like a ton of pain, I'm not gushing blood, so let's just go home. So we went home, and I finally got in with a doctor here in Puerto Rico. We're in Puerto Rico, and got an ultrasound, and come to find out there was no heartbeat, and also come to find out I was pregnant with twins. And one of them was smaller than the other one. The other one looked like formed, the other one was like small. And at this point I was about 7 or 8 weeks pregnant. I think I was just about to be 8 weeks pregnant. And they said there was no heartbeat, but they said, you know, this can happen sometimes where there's no heartbeat, but don't worry, they sometimes go on to find the heartbeat. It might just be too early. And because a lot of times they will base your pregnancy age based off of your last period. Even if you got pregnant like 2 weeks after your period, they still base it off of when you got your period. I could have been earlier, but they said I was later just based off my period. So they're like, we're gonna do a blood test now to test your HCG levels. Basically, like, that level should be doubling every 2 days. So I took my first test, and my numbers were really high. I was like at 84,000, which is really good. I thought like, wow, okay, that's a good sign. Like, my levels are high. But then the second test came back 2 days later, and it had dropped. And honestly, that was the saddest moment for me, because then my fear was confirmed. At that time, like, they were saying like, okay, maybe the heartbeat's not there, but maybe it'll come. But then with this blood test, it kind of like, my hopes got high because the levels were high. And then the second time it was like half as much, or like a lot less. It was like 20,000 lower. So then I started to really be sad. My heart was broken, because I had already started falling in love with my babies, and so weird because you fall in love with these tiny things inside of you. They're so small, but you love them already. And so for me, that was really heartbreaking, that moment, because I knew what was coming. And then after that, like, I was sad for a couple days. I was like crying a lot. At this point, I was very sad. No one actually had told me up until this point that I was pregnant with twins, which is the crazy part. I think that had kind of got lost in translation because they didn't want to give me too much hope, maybe. I'm not sure, but I had called my friend. She had had a couple miscarriages and I didn't know who else to call, so I called her, and she was looking at my images, and her friend, her cousin is ultrasound tech, and so she showed the pictures to her and she's like, you were pregnant with twins, that's crazy. And I had actually had a prophecy saying that I was going to be pregnant with twins. So after I heard that, it kind of gave me this new hope, like, okay, maybe there was a mistake. Maybe, like, obviously I'm supposed to have twins, so maybe there was a mistake or something. I had one more ultrasound done because I didn't want to make any big decisions without knowing for sure. So I had another one done, and the ultrasound tech, he was very sweet, and he just kind of let me know that there still wasn't a heartbeat and that things were not looking good, and he did confirm that it was twins. So after that, I was still hopeful. I was still believing that God can do a miracle if it's his will, and I just was hoping for that. Of course, I'm hoping for the best. After that, we were in the process actually of closing on a condo in Florida. And so we ended up flying to Florida to meet my parents, and my parents were so excited. And finally, I met with my parents. They got to be with me, and 2 days later, we were at dinner, and all of a sudden, I feel this rush of blood, like a period, and I knew immediately what was happening. I got really scared because then in that moment I was like, okay, this is happening. What is it like? Like, is it painful? Up into that moment, I had already decided that I wasn't gonna do anything unnatural to end my pregnancy, even if I thought for sure that there was no way these babies were gonna make it. There was no heartbeat. I still didn't want to do anything. That's just my view. I didn't want to do anything. If it was going to happen, I wanted it to happen naturally. And so in that moment, I knew it was happening. And I remember texting my friend and being like, I'm so scared. Like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know what it's going to be like. And so that's another reason why I'm making this video, because I know these things happen, and like after they happen, you kind of forget about it and you want to forget about it. But it's also important, I think, for other people going through this. Hopefully this can give you some assurance of what it's like, and that you don't need to be afraid. And also for myself, just so I can remember like what it actually was like, because I know these things happen, and then a few years down the road you might forget. And sometimes that's good, but sometimes like you want to know in case it ever happens again. I remember being scared and not knowing what was going to happen next. We went home because I was scared that I was going to have this happen to me while we were at the restaurant. And so we went home back to our Airbnb where we were in Florida, and nothing ended up happening that night, but I did wake up the next morning early, like around 6:30. And I went to the toilet, and all of a sudden stuff just started coming out, and it felt like, and I'm sorry if this is too much, if it is, feel free to fast forward. It felt like just like a lot of clots coming out, and like sometimes you feel that with your period. It was like a lot of that coming out, and it wasn't like red blood, but it was like thick, and I didn't want to look at it, so it was just coming out, and I would flush it. And I had my husband come be with me because I was still kind of scared. And then after like, I would say a couple hours, like 2.5 hours, it stopped. And so I thought I was done. And up until this point, I was having some like strong cramps. That's another thing I forgot to mention. Like probably a week before this, maybe like a week and a half before when I first started spotting, I was having like really painful cramps. And it was like to the point where I was like sweating, and having to like breathe and like almost like contractions. I'm guessing that's what contractions feel like. My husband came and sat with me, and after like 2.5 hours, it was done, and I just wanted to lay down and rest. And so I was like laying and resting. And I remember it was even hard to like walk around because I was afraid stuff was just gonna come out. It's getting dark here, so I went to turn the light on really quick. I thought everything was done, so I was just focused on resting, recovering, healing. And then actually like this was during the hurricane as well. We had just had a Hurricane Fiona come to Puerto Rico, and then when we went to Florida, we were there during Hurricane Ian as well. Thankfully, we were more north, so we didn't have any effects from that, but we were trying to make sure that we weren't in the hurricane. So all this was going on at once. We were avoiding the hurricane by having to go north up to Jacksonville more, and at the same time, I was worried about what was going to happen. So I thought that everything had passed and I thought we were in the clear, but then all of a sudden the next day I start getting cramps again, and I start feeling a little feverish, and I was worried. I was like, okay, maybe I'm getting like an infection or something. And so at that point, we went to the hospital in Florida, and we sat there for a few hours again, and I finally was seen. They did an ultrasound. I remember they gave me, they put the IV here. It was the most painful thing ever. Same with a huge needle to take blood tests again. And come to find out, there was no heartbeat again. There was still a baby in there, and my HCG levels were probably around 30,000 at this point. And so they said that I was still having a miscarriage. So at that point, I went home again, and we just were having to wait until this happened. And finally, it happened. I was home, and I believe it happened 2 days later. We went back to the Airbnb, and I was just falling asleep around 12:30. It was around 12. I was just falling asleep. That feeling like when you're just drifting off and you're like about to go into dreamland, and I feel this rush of blood again, and I'm like, okay, it's happening. And I tell my husband, it's happening. Can you come with me to the bathroom? I'm really scared. And so he came with me, and he was holding my hand, and we were there for like 3.5 hours, and it was like nothing like the first time. The second time was like way more blood. I've like never seen so much blood. I just kept flushing and flushing, and you just feel like those clots coming out, and you feel kind of like an egg is coming out. That's what it feels like to me. I didn't look again. I didn't want to see anything. And finally my husband was falling asleep, so I was like, you know what, I think I'm almost done here. Why don't you just go to sleep? And so he went to bed, and turns out I was not done. It kept coming out, and so finally I was like, I should probably, thankfully my parents were there with us in Florida, and I got my phone and I called my mom, even though she was in the other room, and she woke up and came and sat with me for the next 3 hours. So I was there a total of like 6 hours on the toilet, and I have never seen so much blood. And so that is just part of it, but just know that that's normal. It's scary in the moment, but everyone goes through this. And so like why I was actually glad that I had my tests done like at the doctor before this and at the hospital is because they just verified that I wasn't anemic, and also that I didn't have an ectopic pregnancy, because a lot of times those can be like risk factors if you're losing a ton of blood. and if you're not able to clot the blood. So that is what they tested, and everything was fine with me. So basically, they confirmed that was safe to have this miscarriage at home, because if you're not able to clot blood and you're losing all this blood, it can be really bad, and you might need to go to the hospital. But for me, thankfully, in the back of my head, I had that information. I was like reminding myself, I'm okay, my bodies can get through this. People do this all the time. And even my mom was like, you're losing so much blood, like, should we go to the hospital? Like, and I was like, no, I don't want to go to the hospital. It's like so painful. Plus, like, what are they gonna do at this point, you know? Um, so I just kept trusting in God. We were playing worship music. It was just like God gave me so much strength, I feel like, in that time, to just trust Him and also get through this thing, because it was like painful, but it was also scary, just seeing all the blood and stuff. I feel like it's more scary than it is painful. The part for me, and like the whole time my mom was just like feeding me food, like water, and like water with salt in it to give me electrolytes, and like soup. I was eating soup on the toilet. I was having like chia seed pudding. I had like a whole feast there. But she wanted to make sure that I was getting enough nutrients because I was losing so much blood. And after that, I finally was like, and my legs would get so tired from sitting on the toilet that I would like lay on the floor. Like my mom made me some blankets and a pillow that like I can lay on the floor and then get up and go to use the toilet if I need to. So that was very helpful. The next thing was after this whole thing, when I finally stopped bleeding enough to be able to lay down, I went back to the bed and I finally slept because I was just so exhausted. Something that really helped me was having like either like a heating pad, or I had this little hot water bottle. We'd put hot water in it and I would put it right here. It really, really helped with like the cramping and everything. Afterwards is when it was the most painful for me. Also, I definitely suggest having some Tylenol or some kind of like pain reliever, because afterward you will have a lot of cramping, and that for me was the most painful part. I remember the day after I was like crying because I was in so much pain. Like it's more crampy than a period, like probably 10 times that. And so it didn't last long. It was only like a day, I would say, but I was taking Tylenol and that really helped. So Tylenol, hot water bottle, those things are like a necessity if you're going through a miscarriage. And be with your family or a friend or your husband if you can, because having that support really helped me get through this. I would say after I went through this, I bled for probably like maybe 2 weeks, where I was just bleeding a lot. And I finally started to recover. I went to my gynecologist finally after I had my miscarriage, and he just verified that everything came out. After that, after I went through this, I was so thankful to be with my parents. My mom and my dad were there, my husband was there. We were actually at the beach because we were just closing on a condo, and I'm just so thankful for that time. Like I feel like even though this was such a traumatic experience, I still see God's hand in this, like so much. Like the way that He allowed me to be with my family during this time and allowed it to not happen on the airplane, and just so many ways that He provided throughout the whole experience. It really grew me in my relationship with God and like trusting Him, and the way that He just helped me heal and recover so quickly. And I just think I found a new strength through this experience, even though it was really tough. I shared before getting pregnant, I shared when I got pregnant, I shared when the miscarriage happened, I shared like the experience of it. And now after having the miscarriage, I think, like I said, the things that really helped me heal were being with people I love, being in nature, spending time with God, and really growing in Him. And I would say also hearing from my gynecologist that this is something that's so common, and a lot of women don't talk about this, so it makes it feel like it's not common, but that really helped me to know that. He says that he sees it all the time and that it's nothing that I did wrong, and that's something that I want to pass along to you guys as well. It's like, if you're going through this, there's like such a high chance that it's nothing that you did wrong, because even he was saying, you know, there's people who are on drugs and they have a healthy pregnancy. You know, it's not because you lifted something or because you did something wrong or you ate something or you missed your prenatals. He was saying it's not that. It's generally because the baby was not forming well, and it's nothing that you could have done differently. You know, it like also gave me a lot of peace to think about it like that. Like, I wouldn't have wanted this baby to suffer being malformed if it was. I don't know why this happened. I don't know why miscarriages happen, but I just know that God can redeem everything, and I believe and I have hope for the future that good things are coming, and I believe that for you as well. I'm not gonna let it make me afraid to try again, and I'm not gonna let it scar me forever. I'm thankful for the short time that I was able to be a mom, and I know that God willing, I will have this opportunity again. And I think this just makes me so much stronger, and I hope that you can get some encouragement from this as well. I also wanted to share some of the things like after this experience that kind of surprised me, and I would say the main one is with the hormones. And you know, people always talk about having like postpartum depression like after you have a baby, but I think I kind of had that same experience for a couple days after I had my miscarriage, because one day specifically, it was the day that my parents left, because they left a few days before we did. And I remember feeling like so scared to go back to real life, like on my own without my mom there to like help me make food. And like, I remember that same day she had left the day before, and I was like on my path to recovery, but I kind of maybe was trying to get back into work too soon. And I tried to start to work. I opened my laptop, and I remember just like freezing and crying, because I was like, how in the world am I supposed to go back to work after what I've just been through? How do women do this? You know, it's crazy. And I was so thankful this whole time. Also, something I forgot to mention earlier is that we work online from home. That's another thing that I just felt so blessed about and thankful for, because a lot of women are not able to work from home, and they have to go through this and then go back to their job. And I just can't imagine that. And I think that it's so sad to me that that is how it is for women, because a lot of people don't understand this unless you've been through it. It's very hard emotionally to go back to normal life after going through something so traumatic and draining. A lot of people just don't really understand, or at least you don't feel like they understand, because you feel kind of alone in this. And so that's how I felt that time that my mom was leaving. And I remember just being in bed and crying and just feeling so like kind of hopeless, and like, how am I supposed to keep living a normal life after this? Thankfully, after that day, it passed, but I think it also has a lot to do with hormones changing and so quickly. I just want you to know that that's normal. And also, like, it's very difficult for men to understand exactly what you're going through, because they're not the ones that were pregnant. So that was also something difficult, is that I kind of felt like Felix doesn't understand me, like he doesn't know like how it feels. And also I'm sure he felt like kind of helpless because he doesn't know what to do to help me, you know? So that is kind of a struggle as well. After all this, I was just actually feeling very thankful and hopeful. And it just reminded me like, wow, I am blessed to be healthy, like moving around, exercising. Like, I feel so excited to exercise right now, because for like 2 months I wasn't able to exercise just because of nausea, and then because of the spotting and everything, I was basically on the couch, and now I'm just like so thankful to even be able to walk or lift weights. This made me more thankful than ever, and it made me stronger than ever. And I think that if you're going through this, I just want to encourage you that this is not the end, it's just the beginning. And don't allow fear to take over your mind. There's amazing things ahead for you, and you can get through this. You can get through this. You are strong, and your body was made for this. And that's something that I kept having to remind myself as well. Women go through this every day, and our bodies are made for this. And I'm just so thankful that I was able to have this experience, even though it was really difficult. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, but I made it, and you will make it too, and we are so strong. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was a long video, but I hope it could encourage you, and thank you for being here and for listening to my story. Bye.